Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to this week's Albayaan Arabic Foundation circle. In between our our Stories of the Prophet series, we are doing topical discussions about interesting topics that are occurring around the world and giving an Islamic slant to it and how we should be impacted by it. And today is one of those sessions. And we have Dr. Shehzad Bashir with us today to discuss the topic entitled "The Pressure to Only Follow Bits of Islam but Needing All of It." So the inequalities in the world, the racial divide, the economic divide has been apparent for a very long time in the world and has become much more of an issue, especially during the COVID crisis time. And people are looking at, is there an alternative way? Is there a different way to do things? Now, in this big discussion, what have Muslims said? What is our response? How should we be addressing it? And that's an interesting discussion, because at the same time, people are telling us, i.e. authorities in the Muslim world especially, that some bits of Islam are okay, some bits of Islam are bad. Now, how do we marry the two? At one side, the world saying what is a new way of doing things, and on the other hand, Muslims being told some bits of Islam are good but others are bad. Now, that's an interesting discussion to marry up, and inshallah, Brother Bashir will tackle these topics in the first part. And in the second part, he will address the story of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, to discuss how his life can be used as an example as people to portray Islam. So inshallah, without further ado, I'll hand over to Brother Bashir.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. I begin in the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, and all praise is due to Allah, Lord of all the worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon the master of the messengers, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his companions. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, sisters, whoever's joining us wherever.
Walaikum salam.
So I want to kind of set the scene of the kind of current where we're at. So the coronavirus pandemic has meant quite a radical change in the world, including in the Muslim Ummah, and even for us as a Muslim community in Britain. So we've had to face quite radical changes to our lives. The masjids have been closed. Never in my lifetime, and even throughout the history of the Ummah, has the jugular vein that runs through every Muslim community been closed. Wherever you have Muslims, you have masjids. The ability to console and grieve with family and friends of loved ones who've passed away or have been ill. So whether we've had somebody directly who's suffered from COVID and passed away, we will know somebody, and it's been difficult to not be there to support them. Likewise, we've had the happy occasions of Ramadan and Eid, or even with family and friends who've had children being born. Again, we've not had that same opportunity to spend that time with them. And the ability to meet with family and friends, it's been used very much like these sort of platforms, WhatsApp groups, Zoom, all of these sort of things. So we've not actually been able to meet with family and friends. People not been able to finish their exams, the youngsters worried about now how they're going to be assessed based on their track record. Many of us may have lost our jobs or means of income, so we're worrying about what the future holds for us. So the normal routine of life, whether it's school, work, all these sort of things, entertainment, they've all had a big impact. And we can see even around us in society, there's been issues. So the wider society you've seen, they're struggling with this isolation and changes to their normal way of living. They've not been able to cope with this lack of entertainment, inability to go on holiday, the loss of income, not being able to pay your debts, limited family to rely on. Unfortunately, these are some things that even the Muslim community is starting to suffer from. And we've seen how the governments have responded. They've struggled to navigate their way through this situation. We've seen the irrational and contradictory decisions they're making because they refuse to tell the people the truth. And we see likewise, the rulers in the Muslim world, we've by and large blindly followed the poor example of Western governments, and we've seen the further hardship for the people. So life has been far from normal, and yet there's a drive to kind of go back to where we were, to get back to some normality. So what should we as Muslims take from this situation, and what do we do going forward? And I think this is where, in this coronavirus pandemic and all of these situations I've described, it's hard to sometimes see the difficulty and see any positives or any good that can come out in this situation. Well, as Muslims, when we judge from Islam, we look at such tests and trials because they're an inevitable part of life. And actually, they're sorts of blessings for us as believers. So you may ask the question, why? Why is it a blessing? And I think this is probably the crux of some of the discussion we'll get into, is because I think the difficulties we face are tests, and they give us an opportunity to prove to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what we are true to our belief as Muslims. We're patient, we're steadfast, and we can persevere against whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, be steadfast with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed upon us. And in return, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He promises His blessings, His mercy, His forgiveness, His reward. And indeed, this is the true success for us in life. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَمَنْ زُخْزِهَا عَنِ النَّارِ وَأَدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. Then whoever is drawn away from the fire and admitted to paradise, then surely he is successful, for the life of this world is nothing but an illusionary enjoyment. So there's an aspect of this is a test and proving our commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But actually in this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He draws on another aspect of this test. And this is what I think this current pandemic really has had an impact, and I think we should all reflect on, is because actually Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's giving us a chance to remember Him. He's given us a chance to come out of our rut of our normality of our life and take stock and say, oh, hold on, where are we going? What have we been preoccupied with? What are we doing? And this should be a reminder to us of how weak and powerless we are as human beings compared to the greatness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how we're needy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's support, guidance in all aspects of life. And a reminder of how temporary the things of this world are. As we've seen, wealth, jobs, family, children, home, all of these can be lost in the blink of an eye. And we've seen with this pandemic, even simple things that we may have taken for granted, such as leaving our homes or meeting with family and friends, can be taken away just like that. And all of this should drive us to question our priorities in life. Are they according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has defined? Or are our priorities pursuing the temporary distractions of this world and allowing this to consume our time and attention? So in normal times, we're often absorbed in the routine of our daily lives, whether it's work, taking children to and from school, social activities, schools, colleges, all of the things that keep us busy, meaning we don't really have the time to think about life. And especially living in a secular liberal society, there's nothing to remind us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing to remind us of the weaknesses of our lives. There's nothing to remind us of the purpose of what our life should be. However, through this test, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us an opportunity. He's shaken up our lives and He said, look, hold on. Let's go back to the reality of what this life is. And through this test, actually, this period lockdown, as when many of us have been confined to our homes, has given us a chance to actually truly reflect upon our lives, our relationship with our children, our family, our spouses, and our responsibilities, and actually how we even view the world and the situation of the world today. So if we fail to use this opportunity, then it is this which is the true loss and misfortune that will befallen us. So in these past 3 months, have we taken stock? Have we reflected? Have we thought about what is going on? Have we thought about change? Have we thought about doing things differently? Or are we intending to go back to normal? And this is the opportunity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us with this coronavirus pandemic. That actually it's a time to take stock. So we don't want to be the ones that miss out on this opportunity and get caught up with the rest of the secular liberal society that we live in, that is just preoccupied with getting back to where we were. And as Muslims, we can't just go back with the flow of society, but we kind of need to take stock. And the danger, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us in this ayah in Surah Al-Imran 185, وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ. And what is the life of this world except the enjoyment of delusion? So I want us to reflect on our lives, whether we are children, youth, parents, in these roles and beyond, as part of a Muslim community, living in a secular, liberal society, and as part of a global ummah. So what have we spent doing these last 3 months? Young people, what have they been doing? Spending the time gaming, Netflix, binge watching, spending time up all night, sleeping all day, hours and hours on social media, just looking forward to the football starting or the release of PS5. Have they been bored out their brains with thinking that there's nothing to do, nothing to put on for the status updates? Frustrated that we can't do the things we used to, like going to the gym, eating out, holidays, chilling out with friends? Or getting annoyed with parents, keep asking us to do things, keep trying to have a conversation with us? Even that's an issue. And parents, have we been frustrated with how our kids are wasting our time? Have we not known what to do with them? Do we worry that we don't have a healthy relationship with them? Are we worried that all they do is spend their time in their room, not knowing what they do in their room? The only conversation we can have with them is sounds. It's not even words. You ask them a question. This is unfortunate reality I see, and I'm sure there's many things that you experience. The question, and I think, and I reflect on what I come across and think, when was the last time we had a meaningful conversation with our children? When was the last time we were happy with our child? Do we feel hurt by the way they talk to us? When did they last smile to us in love, with the aspect of love? Are we even scared of our own children, of the anger and rage that they might show to us, especially as they get older in the teenage and young adult age? And how long did Father's Day last? And some of us, our children may be young and we may not see that firsthand, but I'm sure we can relate to people that we know and the situation out there, and we see how children and young adults unfortunately behave today. And wider, we see in the community. Look at this issue of racism. How do we as Muslims respond? We've seen the famine in Yemen and how that's played out. What's our role? The constant turmoil we see in the Muslim world. Today, you've seen last night there was an incident, and straight away there's already being called a terrorist incident. Already, no doubt, it'll be laid onto the Muslim community. We've had the masjid closures. People have talked about, they're worried about, well, if we open up the mosques and there's a second spike, we're going to be blamed for it. So this is the kind of atmosphere that I've sensed in this kind of period. And I'm sure you'll have experienced some of these and maybe others as well. And I think today is an opportunity to kind of discuss these and make sense of them. Because actually, why are these happening? And for me, is where has been Islam in these? How often is Islam referred to when we see these problems and these issues and how we address them? And unfortunately, for many of us, the last 3 months have been a real eye-opener, because actually they've shown what our lives are really about. Because we've probably been distracted, as I've talked about before. And until this kind of lockdown period, and we've been there's been microscopic lens put on our lives. We've been cattled together in our homes. And we've actually saw, unfortunately, the unsavory fruits of what we've nurtured. And I think if we think our situation is bad, I think it's far worse for non-Muslims out there. Whilst we still have some aspects of Islam that have helped us navigate some of these challenges and help us navigate through some things, wider society has none of that. They don't know what to believe. They don't know how to deal with illness and death. They don't have any people to really share and confide with. And they've got a way of life that's deceiving them, which is just creating misery. So after this lockdown period, do we want to go back to that life? Look at the fruits of it, look at the issues it's created. And there's far more things of it that we've seen. The inequalities that Dr. Asif talked about. And even the fallout that's going to come over the coming months and years. But is this really what we want to go back to? Is this the kind of reality that life has been built up to, that we've seen in these last 3 months? And is it really what we want to kind of get back into the rut of life? And maybe, that's because, I'll tell you now, that's where society's heading. There might be a few cosmetic changes, but that's where it's kind of heading. And these realities more, I think, I've described as examples, really exist because of the values of society. And this is where actually we see how much of Islam is actually present. Because actually the values of this society really drive these realities. These are come about because of these values. These values being, you're only thinking about yourself. You're only worried about how you can enjoy life. All about what you need, not caring about others, not worried about how your behavior affects others. And you're just caring about this life. This is because the criterion society is just about the interests of the rich and elite. And everyone is a slave to that. They're more interested in saving the system from collapse rather than looking after the welfare of the people. They want to make sure nobody questions these values, these secular liberal values that have resulted in this mess. And these values affect us all. Whether you're a child growing up, whether you're a teenager, whether you're a parent, teacher, whoever, politician, or even us as imams, or even whoever it may be. And we have to think about, we live in a society that has these values, and we have to be quite conscious how it's affecting us and our outlook. And I think to understand this a bit more, think about how these values have resulted in the mess we find ourselves in. So we should ask questions about why are children always bored? Why is it society is unable to raise children into mature and responsible adults? Why are parents not given the tools to raise children? Why are communities left to fend for themselves, to look after the homeless, to set up food banks, show gratitude to the NHS, and so on? Why do imams feel unable to address the problems? Why was it left to Captain Tom, a pensioner of 100 years of age, to raise money for the NHS? It was a footballer, Marcus Rashford, the one who highlighted the need to feed poor children. He was showing the politicians what it means to care. The brutal murder of George Floyd, it required people to come out and protest against the very institution and system, whether the police, it was set up to supposedly deliver justice. You see the foreigners who've been attacked and maligned, but they're the ones who bailed out the NHS. We've seen the discussions about schools opening. Actually, it's been more about supporting childcare and feeding kids than actually education, which is what they should be about. And it's not been the rich elite that the government's been asking to spend and get the economy going. It's back to the average Joe. There's been no question on these millionaires and billionaires and how they've even taken advantage of the furlough, the grants and loan schemes. But it still comes back to the people. You've seen the discussion in society about the need for the high street to open. Where was the discussion about the importance of the faith institution? Where were they relegated to? So the answer to all of these underlying issues is the values of this society, these secular liberal values, which have only created misery and more problems. And for us, this is what we, I think, really need to think about, is a lot of these issues we may taint or we may not understand or we don't look at. And we have to look at is how much of these secular values underpin a lot of this outlook, how we look at these situations. And we get caught up in the run of society. Where do we step back? Where do we make sense? Where do we say, hold on, we've got a different outlook. We don't follow the same basis. And in Islam, we have our own criteria that allows us to judge from. This criteria gives us a purpose of life. It gives us a Sharia to refer to for all our problems. It gives us an outlook of a duty of being responsible to our community, an outlook of being a witness towards the delivery of this message to humanity. And it has a system and a way of life. Now, we can't choose bits of this criteria and leave others, and we can't decide what we want to choose from it or not. Because as Muslims, we need to refer to Islam as a way for the way out. And not Islam as a religion, but Islam, the way of life. So we need to rise above the challenges we face, whether individually, as a family, as a community, as an ummah, whether that is our lack of confidence, whether it may be fear, whether it may be being unaware, or whatever else may be stopping us from referring to Islam. So it's not just about us that will, and it's not just about us that will lose out if we don't. There's a whole humanity out there who's at loss. They will continue to see more injustice. People will continue to be lost with their lives, and we will have abandoned our divine duty. And I think this kind of backdrop of what I've kind of described is probably somewhat, I'm sure others may want to share some of their own examples of the past 3 months and the things they've come across. And then probably on the second part, I'll go through how, from the life of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, how he, and I think 3 aspects that I want to focus on are actually how do we move forward. 1 of knowledge, 2 of responsibility, and 3 of bravery. And these are the 3 aspects that I think we can really look on in the life of Ibn Abbas to take some lessons from.
Jazakallah. So what I'll do, I'll open up the floor to comments and questions. Just feel free to just start talking, and then I'll pause, or you can put your hand up just to discuss what the issues he's raised. One point that definitely struck home with me with what brother was saying was that when things are well, people are not looking for change. And things are well, economically well, everything's health is good, family's healthy, everything's going well. That's not the time that you start thinking about change. When the difficulties hit, like coronavirus, like a death in the family, economic problems, then you start realizing actually, how is my life? What's my purpose of life? How am I coping with this? Maybe things not, equal. You start thinking about the need for change, and it's definitely a strong point that this is the time where the world has been turned upside down economically, equality, everything's been turned upside down and has been exposed. So now is a perfect time to raise that discussion about what we can offer. So alhamdulillah, I think that point was very powerful for me. But one thing I was thinking of is when we talk about what Islam has to offer problems in the world, you can get a feeling that it may sound strange or it may sound awkward when you talk about Islam having a solution, because that's not the norm in discussion. So I don't know how you would address that kind of thinking, or maybe you'll address it in your second part. Brother Bashir.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is about being unaware. I think, there's a couple of examples that I think really stood out to me. One was initially when the whole coronavirus first hit out, and there was this whole concern in the Muslim community around how we're going to bury our deceased. There was a real concern that, hold on, actually, there's going to be a lot of deaths, and actually we might get overwhelmed, we might not be able to cope. And there was a lot of concern in the community and worry, and there were all sorts of, and it kind of, and in some of the discussions I was in the community, it kind of highlighted to me, hold on, actually, let's, and you know, people were getting caught up, oh, we won't be able to do this, we won't be able to do that, and actually, you know, we don't need to do this, we don't need to do, and people were just picking aspects of Islam and saying, oh, look how this justifies it in this situation, we don't have to do this, we don't have to, and I thought, hold on, let's just step back, and this is what referring back to Islam comes to, that hold on, actually, what is it we're required when our duty as Muslims, when somebody leaves this dunya, what's their right on us to them? That this is an obligation on us to, you know, prepare them correctly according to Islam for their burial. And then we look at, okay, how do we make this in the safest kind of way? And I think that initially people kind of got the climate, the environment, and the worry and the concern. Islam got, you know, kind of left to the sidelines. And that was about us bringing it back front and center and saying, well, actually, look how Islam, and actually,
Seem to have lost Shehzad.
Okay, until that, you can speak a little bit.
Inshallah. But
Yeah,
definitely one of the other things that I was definitely was when Shehzad, hopefully when he joins back,
yeah,
he mentioned about now's a time also to see what Islam has to offer. And definitely when I was seeing people whose like family members have died, how can you console these people? They can't even go to the janazah, they can't even do things like that. So what can we offer them? And I realized that Islam enabled me to console these people. Islam gave me a framework that this is a test. The person who died during a pandemic dies the death of Shaheed. Islam gave me a good framework to be able to treat or console my family members in this issue. And without Islam, you're really struggling. When people are deceased, how you can cope with this problem. Other issues like jobs, economics, when you're losing money, Islam provides a very nice framework to be able to cope with these disasters. And when Islam isn't there, it's very difficult to cope with these disasters because you can't make sense of it in your mind. And I think those were issues that definitely came into my life in the last 3 months, especially with Corona. Any other comments from people?
and here, mashallah, it was very beautifully, he pictured everything, you know, what is going on in our past few months, alhamdulillah. You know, I was listening, you know, the word by word, mashallah, everything, you know, it is coming to my mind, everything, whatever he was discussing. Here, one of the Quranic verse I want to, you know, discuss with the people also. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was maybe closer to 40 years, you know, closer to the nubuwah, and what was his job? You know, if you look at the history, his job was, subhanallah, is concerning about the people, and he knows all the problem surround in Makkah, and he know with the details, you know, political and economical, social, and even all the welfare system and everything. He knows where the wrong thing, but he was, you know, he doesn't know the solution, because that time the Islam was not exist, but he was realized, and then he was you know, the searching for solution. This is the reason he is pondering, thinking, you know, the sit and think and realize the situation. Even in the Quran, subhanallah, فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ, this Quranic verse, you know, like فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ, where are you going? You know, this is exactly fitting to every one of us, because we don't know where we are going. We should take a time to sit and think and realize, and are we doing the correct job? And this is a very big area. And finally, I conclude here. The first things, alhamdulillah, we need to realize our situation. Then where is the solution? Alhamdulillah, the time of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was searching for solution. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given the solution. And I want to, you know, point out, you know, the many people, they can search the solution from many scholars and many revolutionary people. But if you go to, you know, find the real solution, alhamdulillah, we have And in 3 words, I can say that's number 1 is Quran. The number 1 is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Number 3, our connection with the Day of Judgment. Because we have the Quran, we have Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam way of life. But the connection with the Day of Judgment, that is the problem now. Because people thinking, we need to live for long in this world. And they are preparing for, do all the things for this world, but they don't have the time to prepare for the hereafter. So, but Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam clearly, he brought this idea, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala given him, the guidance is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's kalam, which is Quran, and the way of life Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam implemented, and everyone knows every angle, and we should connect with the Day of Judgment. These are the first step. Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was guided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you take any Quranic surahs, early stage it comes, you can see these all 3 things. And inshallah, I think I'm eagerly waiting for the next part, inshallah, and we can continue, inshallah.
Shani had his hand up. Would like to make a comment or question?
Shafi also.
Yes, I've seen that. Shani or Shafi, whoever wants to speak first. Shafi or Shani?
Yes, can I? Assalamu
Yes,
alaikum.
go, Shafi.
Jazakallah khairan, Brother Shehzad. When he was speaking, there were 2 things that came into my mind. The first one is about the loss that we are facing, or people that we know they have faced or they are facing, and that remind me of Ayub alayhi salam. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him so much. He gave him wealth, he gave him progeny, he gave him social life. Everybody wanted to be around him, and with the disease that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him, all this started to disappear. Yeah, so he was his health was not there anymore, his wealth was not there anymore, his progeny was not there anymore. He lost, I think, all the children. And but we need to see here how he, Ayub alayhi salam, reacted to all this, that he was even ashamed to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give him back everything, because he was saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me all this for so many years, and I can't be just complaining for these small losses for that just started. I have had so much for so many years. I can't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so early. And this has to give us big lessons, because we need to show, as Brother Shehzad said, patience and perseverance, because these are the things that will, the things through which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is testing us. He will be testing us through loss of health, wealth, progeny, and we have to show this patience, because this is what will lead us to the success. And the other thing is that this idea of we all have this in mind, that when is the things will go back to normal. Yeah, what was before is better than now. And actually it's not that we can always think in this way, because Ayub alayhi salam was not teaching us this. And even if we see the reality, for example, in Yemen or in Libya or in Syria, we from here, from the West, we sometimes think that if things could be brought back, and for example Gaddafi was there again, and all these things would disappear, there would be no problem. But we as Muslims, we need to think that if there are things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going us through, there are reasons. And things, for example, in Syria or Yemen or Libya or many other places, those things were happening and are happening now, those brutalities, because Islam was not there in the first place. So we can't ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hope for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring us back to the mess. We need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the best, and that is only through Islam. So patience will come through Islam, and a happy and successful life and hereafter also will come through Islam. This is what we need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for.
Jazakallah. Shani, did you have a comment? You had your hand up earlier.
Yeah, sorry, I got to log off and come back in. Well, main thing I wanted to mention is one thing from my experience of the lockdown coronavirus situation. One was, like Shehzad mentioned, all the aspects of Islam that we were used to, now we appreciate whilst we're in lockdown. Like funerals, meeting people, the weddings, the going to the masjid, meeting brothers, all them aspects you miss. And even Eid, Ramadan, the whole blessing of meeting people on Eid and Ramadan and Taraweeh, missed heavily. So that side of Islam that I miss hugely. And then there's an aspect of the lockdown that I appreciated, that of life at home, away from the hustle and bustle, and that was spending time with the kids, getting to know them better, spending time with the missus, and connecting again there, and spending time with close family again, and appreciating the discussions and everything like that. And I suppose my question is, after lockdown, one, like Shehzad said, the world's in a worse place. Economically, life's going to get busy again. Economics going to be more harder. We have to work harder just for the same. How do we maintain what we've learned and keep the goodness from before lockdown in this new reality that we're going to face of harsher economic climate and racism, the right wing, and all these other aspects? How do we maintain what we had and what we've learned in this new environment?
Okay, Jazakallah khair. I'll probably, if I carry on with the second bit, and then I'll address that question.
Yeah, I think you should maybe start the second half now. We can take questions again late after that.
And I think I will touch on that, because I think it is about, and this is where I see very much from the lessons of the life of Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhu, who was he was actually the cousin of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there's three aspects of it, and these are probably things that I think in part an answer to the Shani's questions around. I think we need to look at knowledge, because what's our mindset of referring to Islam and understanding Islam, and what's the fruit of that knowledge, and understanding our responsibility. That, you know, this is a duty from Islam, and it is recognizing it requires bravery. Testing times and hardships and struggles and temptations, they require courageous people to be able to say, I don't want to be just one amongst the crowd. I can't be one amongst the crowd. I've got to be somebody different. And actually, when I'll go through some of the life of Ibn Abbas, and you can see these three qualities really come out. And actually, there's even more subtle qualities within that, I think, that we should be quite conscious with, in terms of especially utilizing in what is left of this lockdown, but really building on that going forward. So Abdullah ibn Abbas, he was the son of Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now, he was just born just 3 years before Hijrah. And actually, when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, Ibn Abbas, he was only 13 years old. So at a young age, he'd spent his time, he attached himself to the service of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would do and help the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his daily things, whether the wudu, salah, the masjid. And he would accompany the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam on his journeys and expeditions. And these journeys and expeditions, obviously, were quite challenging times. And in effect, Ibn Abbas, he became like the shadow of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, constantly in his company. And this was all at a young age. So don't think there wasn't any temptations for him to occupy himself with. You know, I'm sure all the other kids were busy spending time playing and all of these kind of things. Yet Ibn Abbas, he chose this. And in all these situations, he had some very distinct qualities. He was attentive. He was alert to whatever the Prophet ﷺ said and did. His heart was enthusiastic. And his young mind was pure and focused. And obviously, he narrated a lot of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So he had that capacity of a mind of being accurate and all of these kind of things. But look at these qualities: being alert, enthusiastic, being pure and uncorrupted mind. We don't see these qualities in society today, but do we not long for these qualities in our children? When we ask them to do something, we straight away we see the lethargy, or we even think, oh, there's no point asking. And the Prophet, he would often draw Ibn Abbas close to him, pat him on the shoulder and say, and he would make dua for him to have a deep understanding of Islam and give him an understanding around this. So look how the Prophet, what role he played with him in showing him love and wanting the best for him. And that's something, again, we've got to be conscious of in getting caught up in society. Do we forget, hold on, what role do we as parents have to play? And during the lifetime of the Prophet, Ibn Abbas, he wouldn't miss any of the assemblies or any of the gatherings of the Prophet. And even after the Prophet passed away, he would attend those gatherings amongst the companions. So he would, look at the conversations he'd been involved in at a very young age. Look at the exposure of life's issues he got involved in, what he would have had to think about. And then you compare and say, what are the youth preoccupied with? What do they have around them? And even us, what do we discuss with them as parents? And Ibn Abbas, he was very dedicated. And he would always ask. And he'd go on asking. And he'd sift and he'd scrutinize and he'd be very diligent in this. And this was like a grounding he had as a child with the Prophet. And this grounding saw him through his teenage into his adulthood. And actually, he became an immense asset for this ummah. So Umar bin Khattab, when he was Khalif, would often seek his advice on important matters of the state. And he would describe him as the young man of maturity. Now, it's these qualities which resulted in Ibn Abbas being known as the learned man of this ummah. And Ibn Abbas, he wasn't just about accumulating knowledge for knowledge's sake. He understood and he felt the duty to the ummah. And I mean, that's a very brief kind of upbringing, but that's the environment Ibn Abbas was in. And the kind of fruits of that kind of nurturing and environment, I think very much shows in this example in the time of the Khilafah of Ali radiallahu anhu. And there was the trial and the fitna. And it was in this example that there was a large number of supporters who'd left Imam Ali. And Ibn Abbas, he went to Imam Ali and asked permission to speak to them. Now, Imam Ali was a bit worried first and hesitated that, maybe he'd be in danger. But eventually, Ibn Abbas convinced him. And Ibn Abbas, he went over to this group. So this was a group that left Imam Ali. And some were willing to speak to him, but others were prepared to give him a hearing. So Ibn Abbas, he asked them, he says, what grievances do you have against the cousin of the Prophet, the husband of his daughter, and the first of those who believed in him? Look at the wisdom of Ibn Abbas, how he tried to soften the hearts of people who were probably a bit animosity in this situation. And he wanted to remind them of who he's talking about and connecting it back to the Prophet ﷺ, because he wanted to bring these people back in the camp of Imam Ali. And then the men, they related the 3 complaints. That one, Imam Ali, he'd appointed men to pass judgment on Allah's laws, as in he'd accepted the arbitration of Abu Musa al-Ashari and Amr ibn al-As in the dispute with Muawiyah. Secondly, that he fought and he didn't take the booty nor the prisoners of war. And third, he did not insist on the title of Amir al-Mu'mineen during the arbitration process, although the Muslims had pledged their allegiance to him and he was their legitimate Amir. So they obviously felt this was a weakness and a sign that Imam Ali was being prepared to to bring his legitimate position as Amir al-Mu'minin in disrepute. So Ibn Abbas said, right, let's look at this situation. So he approached them and he said, if I cite from you the verses of the Quran and the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, would you be prepared to change your position? And they replied, yes, we would. So Ibn Abbas, look, he took on that responsibility. He saw this situation. He saw what was going on, this division amongst the Muslims, and he thought, how can I bring this camp of Muslims back to Imam Ali? So he took on that responsibility in a very, this is a fighting, this is a war situation. So he went through these, each of these examples. I'm probably not going to get time to go through all of them, but just probably a touch on the one. So in the second one that they raised, and he asked them, and he said to them, for your statement that you said that Imam Ali fought and did not take prisoners of war as the Prophet ﷺ did, do you really desire to take your mother Aisha radiallahu anha as a captive and treat her as a captive? And if you answer yes, then you have fallen into kufr. And if you say that she is not your mother, then you would have also have fallen into a state of kufr. And choose for yourself what you want. And they realized that, hold on, they hadn't understood the situation. They wouldn't really understood, hold on, how are we judging this situation? So these 3 points that they raised against him, Ibn Abbas was able to, with his wisdom and his understanding and his knowledge of the Quran and the Seerah, able to respond. He wasn't wowed, he wasn't dumbfounded by the environment. He was able to step back and understood his responsibility. And he was managed to, through this, bring 20,000 back with Imam Ali. And you kind of see, and again, like I said, this was a culmination. You know, this was in a very acute situation for the Muslims. And there's a few quotes I'll just bring to an end with, kind of realize these points of knowledge, responsibility, and bravery. And he says, when I realize the importance of a verse of Allah's book, I would wish that all people should know what I know. When I hear of a Muslim ruler who deals equitably and rules justly, I am happy on his account and I pray for him. When I hear of rains which fall on the land of Muslims, that fills me with happiness. So these are some lessons of the life of Ibn Abbas. And the questions I would ask is, do you think Ibn Abbas enjoyed his childhood? Do you think his parents were happy with him? Do you think he was an obedient and loving son? Do you think people respected him? Do you think people went to him for help and he would help them? Do you think he was an asset to his community? Do you think he was an asset to this ummah? Do you think he was an example of a true politician who had concern for people? And these are the kind of reflections that we should look at in the temptations and the distractions and the pulls we have on us growing up, raising children, living in this society. We're pulled in many, many different directions. And actually, these three things, I think, are center point. And Ibn Abbas's life shows that knowledge. We need to know Islam. We need to understand Islam. We need to have a mentality of being able to refer to Islam when we have our issues. And being conscious that our understanding of Islam is not affected by undertones of secular liberal values. And understanding we cannot have a selfish outlook. We have a responsibility and a duty to ourselves, our families, our community, wider society, our ummah, and humanity. And bravery. It's not easy going against the tide. It's hard. It's hard being different. It's hard being the one that stands out. But this is the courageous aspect that we need to build. And maybe in the question and answer, we can discuss how we do some of this. I mean, some of the وآخر وأدعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Jazakallah. If there's any questions or comments, raise your hand or just start talking. I think when I was listening to that story, I think one point that's actually quite really stuck in my mind, that when you said that Ibn Abbas, what did you say? You said right from a young age, he was around the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he consistently involved in that environment and the discussions. And it made me realize that if we want to change ourselves and become an asset for this ummah, we need to be consistently involved in things, i.e. either consistently follow the news if we want to get politically aware, consistently read the Quran if we want to strengthen our hearts. This and other examples are such. It has to be consistent, because I realize it for the ummah if we just rely on like a crash courses of just quickly study something, quickly do this, that's not really going to help anyone. But if we want to really be an asset, consistency is a paramount. And we apply that for the rest of our life. Like, for example, exams, you consistently revise. The person who consistently revises often does better, rather than someone who just crams it in at the end. So definitely, I think that was a very pertinent point, which I can apply to my life. Naeem's got his hand up. Go ahead, Naeem. Naeem is still there?
Assalamu
Waalaikum
Islam, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't know if you could hear me, because I couldn't hear you guys. It's breaking up quite a bit. Jazakallah khair for the circle, Shehzad. Really thought-provoking. Just wanted to say, from where I am, I was just thinking about everything you talked about. And I was thinking, you know, the big thing with all of this, I think, is that people, generally Muslims, we need a reason in it, a reason for living, a reason why we're doing what we're doing. In society, reason is a big issue. Like, nothing's given a reason. You just carry on with it. You do what you're going to do. You go to work, you come back, you do what you do with the kids, you'll go do what you're going to do in the evening, go to the gym. There's not actually a reason for anything. And I think once you start questioning this reason, then you'll come into the main crux of it, which we talked about earlier, which is your purpose. I think for Muslims, it all centers around having a purpose of life. And this whole discussion, I think, for me, when I'm listening to it, is about what is our purpose in life and how we can frame all of this in our purpose of life. Because for a long time, we've had this discussion about, or people, we discuss, I can remember from a young age, about what's purpose of life is Islam, but we never really got into it until now. You look at the state and the society we live in, and it's just purposeless. You take away the economy from society, and it's absolutely lost. There's nothing people can do. They don't feel like there's much living. You know, having children. It was about, for a lot of people. I mean, I'm a taxi driver. I pick up. They're struggling with benefits, and a lot of times the benefit was a big drive for people to be able to, you know, live and have a comfortable life, if you might, with a lot of children and that. So just the fact that people have lost, once we can get into the discussion, I think, in terms of as Muslims, what's our purpose in life, then that will open up a host of questions. The answers to these questions is what will start filling in the gaps for, I think, these things that we're talking about now. Now, as an example, we talked about racism. Now, if you look at the Black Lives Matter guys, they don't know, half of them don't know what a world without racism looks like. So they don't actually know what they want. They just don't like the situation they're in. So there hasn't been any kind of, there's no conceptualization. They haven't thought, what is it? What do we actually want? Do we want a position in parliament? Do we, you know, what does the end of racism kind of look like? So there's no kind of discussion. So this is why it's important for us not to look at separate issues, but look at this whole thing within a purpose, because we don't want to be looking at individual things like racism and stuff like they're looking at, because inequality won't deal with racism. Like, if they're given more roles, that won't be the end of racism. So I think for us, it's important for us to look at this whole thing as in a purpose of life. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah, that's a very apt point. another thing, I mean, if Shehzad, I think, wants to comment on that. No, he's looking down.
Sorry, say that again.
One of the other points that I think with Ibn Abbas, it looked like you at that point from Naim. Points that you raised about Ibn Abbas' story was about how he had wisdom. And I think that is a very powerful point for us in our community, especially when you've seen the attacks happen.
I think one of
recently in Reading. Go ahead, Shehzad.
I think I'm touching on Naeem's point, and even okay, how do we take this forward? I think let's break it down into simple blocks. Ibn Abbas, he just had very inquisitive. The Prophet nurtured a very inquisitive mind in him, and as we're parents or people in the community and we see issues, we should also develop this inquisitive mind. Unfortunately, societies dumb down people. People don't question, people don't. And I think even simple things like conversation is a big challenge today. People can't handle any sort of mature conversation. So one of the blessings it has been being at home more with family is having those conversations and actually getting and talking about things. What's going on? What do they think? How they're feeling? And I think actually there's some very basic things that have just kind of really disappeared. And that's why I said, you know, the realities of you may live in a small terraced house, but people don't talk to each other because kids are in the room, whatever, parents got the TV on, somebody else has got a tablet or phone. How do you know what's going on in people's heads? How are you trying to make sense of things? Are you questioning? Are you understanding? Are you studying? Are you reading? Are you trying to develop? So actually, I think sometimes it's just those simple things. Let's start off on those things because actually I think they're missing. And actually just that, I think, should be a chance for people to take stock and say, do you know what? Actually, I get a lot more happiness of spending time with my children and talking. I won't spend much, and I miss that kind of company with the community and talking to people. So actually, why am I preoccupied with other nonsense and rubbish? Why do I need to spend so much time on social media, just flicking through pages and pages of what people are doing? So actually, I think let's not, you know, build some solid basics first. And actually, let's discuss these kind of things. Children, mashallah, are very rational. Society then gets them preoccupied with nonsense, to be honest with you. Have those kind of mature conversations. Ask, what do they think on racism? There's opportunities for us to build our outlook. So I think in all of these kind of things, there's opportunities for us to actually discuss these things. And in our opportunities in wherever we are, friends, neighbors, colleagues, there's a rich environment now that people, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a situation where people are questioning their lives. We've got to take that advantage and present Islam. Because if we don't, these people will go back. They will be deceived by the elites who just want to maintain the status quo. That would be a tremendous injustice.
And Dr. Asif, and I have a small point, not much. And
Feel free.
You are there, yes, mashallah.
Yes, go ahead.
Subhanallah, everything is very important, especially it is related to our parenting also. And subhanallah, this, you know, the culture which we are living now, maybe, and the 20th, 21st century culture. And normally they make the people, they don't want to, you know, the talk anything, you know, just themselves, keep quiet. And, you know, preoccupied with the things which is not related to their, you know, regular daily life. And also it is not supporting, not helping for their daily life, and also not supporting at all for the hereafter. So when it's come to the character like Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, just, but I think we can't comprehend, how the 13 years old boy, yeah, and he was like a main figure, Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. If you see, like this, Abdullah ibn Abbas, and when it's come to Quran, when it's come to Hadith, when it's come to Subhanallah, the community things, and we can see him. So, in my opinion, and what is make him, like a big person, achiever, as a good company, the company of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and also company of the Sahaba ridwanullahi alayhim. And this is normally we call in Arabic Suhbatu Majid, the noble people's company. Unfortunately, nowadays, this is the thing we are missing. So, and even the COVID-19 lockdown period, what is happening now? Maybe we have one or two people to go and sit and talk. Even we are missing, this small chatting. So I think I want to mention, like parents, they need to think, how I can discuss with my children, and also who are my children's, the good companion. And this companion, they need to occupy with the companion. So this is the victory we can find in any time, even the lockdown period. If you have the good company, alhamdulillah, you will have and also you will have, inshallah, good time. And this is, my understanding from this noble Sahabi radiallahu anhu. And the final point I want to mention, that when we take about the message of Islam, and Surah Al-Baqarah mentioned very clearly, there are three types of people. One is Muslim, and the second part is Kafir, the third part is Munafiq. And your title of the day today, we need to enter into Islam totally, and we are missing some part. So this is the area is a Munafiqun, because Hamdallah radiallahu anhu, he was shouting and he was running around the Medina, street, and he said Hamdallah is, like a Munafiq. Nafaqa Hamdallah. And how this was not he, became a hypocrite, but he felt when he was sitting with Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam totally different, and when he was alone totally different. They felt, and they did not, hide this one. They expressed to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this, this is the same feeling we are feeling now. When we are in the masjid, alhamdulillah, we feel like Islamic atmosphere. But when we are at workplace, when we are in the town center, when we are in the park or car, these are the things we are missing. So when we have the good company and the discussion, and I think we will regain again, we will enter into the criteria of Muslim rather than staying in the Munafiqun territory. Jazakumullah khairan.
One point that when Brother Shehzad was talking about discussing these things with our children, I think that's very important. Made me realize an example that occurred with me, with my children, that they have not heard of racism. They don't really even know. They're young children, obviously, but they don't really know black color, skin, that color. That never registered with them. But now it's on the news. They have realized what is happening. So we can't just ignore these discussions with them, because they'll just get their information and knowledge from the Sky News. And it was a very good time to talk about racism and talk about what Islam has to say about it. Because I think if we do this consistently with our children, they will be raised in a manner where they realize Islam has something to say about everything. The personal life, their spiritual life, and Islam has something to say with politics, with what's happening around in the world. Because you'll always link what's happening around the world to Islam. And I think, as per your story with the Sahabi, that if things are done consistently, you'll see fruits of it later. So I think that's a very apt point to discuss. Anyone else want to make any comments? We're reaching near our end. Shafi, last comment.
Assalamu alaikum. I just have a very quick comment, and that is about the importance of having somebody to look up to at all times. So we see, for example, Abdullah ibn Abbas or Anas radiallahu anh, they were always in the company of Rasulullah because they were basically looking up to Rasulullah to learn from him. So Rasulullah was like a mentor for them. And this is what we need also. Adults and children, youngsters, we all always need to have somebody to learn from. And the parents, they should be very concerned about this, because if they are able to give something to their children, they also know that there is something else they can't. So that is where they should be asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help them to find some sort of mentor for their children for those specific things. Like, for example, we try to have to go to the best school because we want the best teachers, and those teachers for those subjects are the mentors for the children, for the youngsters. Yeah, but at the same time, we should also be aware for the rest of the the rest of the aspects of our lives, personal, private, how to develop all this in an Islamic way. And to do that, we need Islam, and we need some people, mentors that are around us. So we need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to always give us, wherever we go, we live here in the West or in the East, we are young, old, we always need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us people in our surrounding that are kind of mentors for us. Jazakumullah khair.
Jazakallah. I think we're reaching towards the end of our session. We've gone past extra 10 minutes. Alhamdulillah, it's been a great session discussing the problem and the solution. And I think the main point that Brother Shehzad made about having knowledge, responsibility, and bravery, if we can apply them in our life and work towards it, we can be real assets to our community and Islam. So I would like to finish with asking Sheikh Ismail to finish with dua, please.